Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Luzniski. This is the Primary of the Ruling Class Rants on the Ruling Class podcast, and my host Todd is with us here. And
Hello,
uh,
everybody.
we're going to be going through some things today. It's kind of good to be back here. We've got some thoughts that we do want to share, I think, that are kind of important and impactful. It's been kind of a situation, I think, Todd, where as we get closer and closer to the election, a lot of the things that we knew were going to happen have been happening. We knew the administrative state's going to double down. We knew the Biden administration is going to double down. We knew the lawfare was coming. So there's really not a lot of surprises there. And I think what we've wanted to do is back up just half a step and take a little bit look at the bigger picture and what's really at stake going on here. And one of the things that I think is absolutely critical is when we look at the ruling class and we look at the different factions of the ruling class, and we look at how we got to be where we are, one of those factions that we've always talked about would be the ruling class intelligentsia. And the ruling class intelligentsia, I think, is, basically, just to frame it, these are the people that are, paid to think, paid to tell other people what to do and how to do it and everything else without maybe actually having ever done it themselves. You think of teachers, college professors, you think of our whole university system, you think of the think tanks, things like this. The problem is they keep getting it wrong. And I think our Department of Education is a great example of that. Go ahead, throw your thoughts in right there before I jump.
Well, we've talked about big bold change. Where where we're at in our country, we can no longer take incremental little chunks back from the ruling class. It's going to take big, sweeping, bold, never before heard changes to get our country back to where it needs to be. They chip away constantly. They never stop. They just take a little at a time, and it just keeps going further and further down towards globalism, communism. And I think we as fellow Americans have kind of turned a blind eye to that. But I think the time in our country has come to where the line has been drawn in the sand for many, many millions of Americans, I would say. And they're paying attention to stuff that they never would before. Well, what this has allowed for me, if any of my friends that know me fairly well know that years ago I talked about stuff that was way out there and had been called a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. And I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me. I've always kind of been one to think outside the box and question things, maybe. And this last week, Trump come out, and I believe it was in his rally in Pennsylvania, if I remember right, but spoke of abolishing the Department of Education. Well, the Department of Education is completely separate from our teachers and our educators. Well, this has nothing to do with our love for teachers on many different levels, personal people that we know, great friends with, and even administrators in schools. But what the education department has done is it's tied the hands of our schools. It has went the complete opposite direction of what it was intended for. And now it's nothing more than NGO or bureaucracy that is making rules and stuff for our kids that schools are required to follow in order to get money to do stuff. If you want funds from the government for your school, you've got to march to what they want you to teach, the curriculum. We saw that in COVID. You had to send the kids back to school with masks if you wanted any funding at all, or they close your school down, threaten you to close the school down. And the Department of Education, it really is one of those facets of our evolved ruling class that I think has taken big chunks from us that we weren't aware of. So when you're talking about Trump closing it, I was like, yeah, now we're talking about stuff that I can get behind. This is the kind of big bold change that you and I have talked about. A lot of other PRC members have talked about in the past. And probably one of the things that helped me, I guess I was already on the path. It started with my dig into 9/11. Probably was what set me on the path to looking into stuff and being dubbed a conspiracy theorist. But I think when I read your book, you called me and said, "Hey, I want you to read my book." And I know you're a sci-fi writer. And I was like, I don't know if I want to read that. And you said it's about politics. So I said, yeah, I'll read that. Absolutely. Well, I think what happened when I read it is this was a light bulb went on for me. And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what's going on. And this furthered me down the path of, in my mind at the time, conspiracy theory. But what it is really now is it's facts that where we're seeing play out right before our very eyes. that you wrote a book about in 2017. Nobody was talking about this stuff in 2017. Very cutting edge stuff that you come out with. And when you spoke about different facets of the ruling class, you spoke about the intelligentsia. And one of the quotes in your book is, of all the groups making up America's self-appointed ruling class, the ruling class intelligentsia is the group that Stress Free Bill, which is your pen name, has the most disdain for. You've referred to them as educated idiots, dupes, and other things. But really what it is, it still holds true today, like you said in your book. And without the financial donations from the think tanks, universities, most of our ruling class intelligentsia would disappear. But they're propped up by funding, and then they get their agenda pushed out through money, which we know always is about following the money. But most of their salaries are derived from you and I.
Mm-hmm.
It goes through the ruling class oligarchy, and they are funded and paid with ruling class tax or with taxpayer dollars to fund the ruling class, is something that's undermining and undercutting the very core and the fabric of this country. And that is erasing history to the fact that, where I question even what I was taught in school, and I know with them tearing down statues and everything, our kids are being taught nothing about history. And we all know that if you don't learn from history or study it, you're bound to repeat it. And where we're going with the ruling class right now, we're going down that same place that many other countries have went, and they're chipping away at it. And it all falls back to the ruling class intelligentsia. So number one, props for your foresight on that. And number two, I'm not such a conspiracy theorist anymore.
No, you're not, are you?
And things are playing out right in front of our eyes. So I guess I'll tee it back up to you, but I mean, it's pretty interesting when you look at the 2017 publishing of your book, and now you have Trump saying we need to abolish the Department of Education.
Well, we're spending, part of what he said in that Philadelphia speech is we're spending, our society, not just the government, but our society is spending $1 trillion on education. Yet our scores don't reflect that. You compare
Right.
us, worldwide, and our scores are much low when you compare us to the modern world. So we're spending a whole lot of money, and obviously it's not going to educate our children. It's going for other reasons, and indoctrination is the probably the most appropriate word I can think of. But we said something in the beginning, Todd, about we're not talking about teachers or even administrators. Well, some we are. Now, we're not against teachers as a profession. We're certainly not against any individual teacher or administrator, right? I mean, we got to be adults here when we understand this, but we do have to understand that indoctrination, that bubble that a lot of these educators live in and have grown up in, a lot of them went to the same schools and universities and got indoctrinated themselves and have now become the teachers and the professors. When we talk about all the money behind it that props up the ruling class intelligentsia, yes, there's a lot of global money that flows in. A lot of money flows in through NGOs. A lot of government taxpayer money flows into it. But you know what? Tenure also plays a big part of that. When you get people in a position that infiltrate, and then you don't really have any good way to remove them. You can't, everything's gone away from accountability now.
Sure.
We start out, we can't hold students accountable. No, you can't discipline anybody in the schools anymore. You can't hold students accountable. You can't hold parents accountable. Well, guess what? They've put in administrators and teachers. Can't hold them accountable. They don't like doing testing anymore because they don't like being held accountable for the results of their students. Everybody points a finger at everybody else. We spend $1 trillion and we end up with nothing except indoctrination. And that's what's got to stop. And the only way, like you said, and you said it very eloquently, actually, I mean, all of the Department of Education puts all these rules in place that make it virtually impossible to fight back against these things.
Right.
And so you have to take that element out of it. And you talked about incrementalism, and that's how we got here, because every time we would compromise, we'd inch closer to socialism, we'd inch closer to communism, we'd inch closer to authoritarianism. And we got to stop that. We can't, and we cannot hope to incrementally build ourselves back. No, let's eliminate the Department of Education. Let's eliminate this whole veneer, this whole overcover of rules and regulations requiring schools and school districts and teachers and educators to follow these principles like DEI and what is it, CRT, and all these other acronyms you want to throw out there,
Right.
and focusing on other things other than education. Let's put it back in the hands of the states. And let's let the states keep their money for that. Let's let the states implement it, judge it, and, be accountable to their voters for it. So that, to me, it's pretty simple. To me, it's not rocket science, and it never has been. But again, you get caught up in all the ruling class and their allies in the media and everything, and it makes it sound like, oh, no, no, if you care about kids, you got to spend $1 trillion. You don't have to spend $1 trillion to care about your kids, Todd.
Well, and I think really what they do is they're so good at it is they are being controlled by puppet masters. And I believe you referred to this in your book that they always frame it in Republicans say this, Democrats say this, or progressives think this, or conservatives think this. That's the way they always frame it. So, and words mean things. We know they say that for a reason because we're trained to think that, well, if a liberal thinks that, I'm not thinking that, or if a conservative thinks that, then I'm going to be against that. So, and that's what they do. They frame it and they play you against each other. Let's get it really what it boils down to is we've tied the hands of our teachers and administrators. We've taken control of our schools away from the local boards. We put it in the hands of the state and federal government, and we have to pay taxes that go out of our district, and then we have to beg, borrow, and steal to get that money back into our district. That to me has always been a stupid thing. I don't understand that. Why would you pool all of your taxes together out of a certain district and then have to beg it back to get stuff done that you need for the school?
Well, and the honest answer is for control, so that
Yes.
they can control us, right? That's called tyranny or authoritarianism, or, put your own word in there, but it's not called freedom, is it? It's not called
No.
self-destiny.
No, and these people that do this, I think a lot of them, we talked about indoctrination now. You're probably my kids that are my age of children that I have. You're seeing parents that have been through the school system, fully indoctrinated in the school system, and now you're seeing second and third generation, and they don't even know that they're working for the ruling class. They're completely oblivious to the fact. They're so enriched in their think tank or the way that the bubble, like you said, I think you referred to it as a bubble earlier. But the reality of it is they're doing the bidding for these globalists, and they're undercutting our country, and they don't even know they're doing it intentionally. And I think I would almost feel, and I think you said this in your book, you would feel sorry for them if they weren't doing so much damage to our country. Did you say that in your
Yeah,
book? I think you did.
yeah.
And that's where I'm at.
Let me ask you a question. This is kind of, we didn't talk about this earlier, but let me just throw this out. Todd, I think I know the answer, but do you think our school systems should teach American exceptionalism?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, and here's the thing. There's some people that come out, well, we want to be fair. We want to be fair to other countries. We don't want to say America's any better than any. I'm sorry. You know, the reason we've led the world, the reason we have freed more people from slavery and authoritarianism, and the reason we have been so respected and done so much good in the world is because we are special, and
Yes.
because we have a constitution that is special, and it's because we've had freedom. That is what American exceptionalism is. And if we don't teach that, then how the hell can anyone ever appreciate why our country is important? How can you have patriotism if you don't understand American exceptionalism? So to me, it's a no-brainer. And all these people are saying, oh, we want to be fair. I'm going to tell you something. Life is not fair. It's one of the first things I've taught kids I'm around,
Yes.
throughout life. If you don't understand that concept, you're never going to understand the real world. And the point is, yes, we need to teach our kids why they should love America, why it's worth defending, why it's worth fighting for, why it's worth our ancestors dying for. Because if we don't teach it, they won't understand that. They'll never appreciate it, and they'll lose it, Todd.
Right. And I think when you talk about American exceptionalism or nationalism, the ruling class has been very good at deeming that a white nationalist or a racist or whatever it is. When I speak of American exceptionalism, I'm talking about every race, color, and creed of American that is fortunate enough to live in this country. They need to realize and be taught that this country is the last shining star for the entire world. And that's something to be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And you can spend your money on whoever you want. If we weren't taxed to death, I'm a very giving person, but when you're paying taxes through the nose to have it sent wherever the ruling class people think that it needs to go, people pull back and they aren't as giving. If we weren't taxed to death, I would give a lot more money to a lot of other organizations that, I think you told me one time, you want to know what's important to a person, look where they spend their time and what's in their checkbook. And that's probably very, very true. Well, you look at any American right now, where are they spending their time? At work. Where's their money going? To the government.
That's right.
And that's not the way this country was designed to do, but that's what they've got us doing right now. And I think part of the intelligentsia's agenda is making us believe, making Americans believe that that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, they're taking our own resources, our own efforts, our own labor, our own our own money, and they're using it against us.
Yep.
I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And it's time for us to put our foot down. Like Trump said, hey, let's get rid of the Department of Education. Now, some people's going to consider that to be a big, bold move. I don't even consider that to be a bold move, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't either. I know, but a lot of people would be like, whoa,
yeah.
Get rid of the Department of Education. What is he talking about? That's crazy talk. But yeah, that's one small chip off the block that needs to happen, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Very easy to get rid of.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't, I mean, we've got a deficit. Look at, I mean, just there's no saying, in my opinion, there is no sane, viable argument to be made for keeping the Department of Education at this point.
Well, really, riddle me this. Why do we have school districts?
Why is it just nationalized schools, right?
That's really what it is.
Because what they're doing everything they can to prevent us from homeschooling, to prevent us from having magnet schools or charter schools, to prevent us from having private schools, right, and vouchers, and have the ability to send kids to any of these other schools. They're doing everything they can to make it a national educational system anyway. So why don't we just call it for what it is? It's federalized education, and we need to say no. We're done with that experiment.
Yeah, I don't think I told you about this, but in my travels here in the last month, I've been traveling a lot for work, and I was watching a baseball game, sitting in a restaurant there at the hotel one night, and these guys come in, and I could tell they were running around with petitions. Been out in the sun all day. They were sweating and hot. They were counting up their signatures and everything, and kind of overheard them. And the guy come up to the counter there where I was sitting and ordered a beer or something. I said, "You guys been running petitions around today?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Want me to sign them?" I said, "Well, I'm not even from around here, so it really wouldn't do any good for me to sign them." But so what are you running around? He goes, "Oh, we're running around drumming up support for public schools." I said, "Oh, so you don't believe that in private schools or charter schools or any of that stuff?" "Oh, heavens, no. People should not be able to spend their money. It needs to go to the public schools." And I said, "Really, that's kind of interesting." And I didn't say nothing. He was standing there, and I could tell he was just like looking at me, and I was just kind of sitting there and kind of ignoring him. He goes, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "I don't think you need to tell me where I send my kids, nor do you have the right to tell me where I need to send my kids to school." First and foremost, I said, "Good luck on getting your petition signed, but I'm not going to sign something like that." He left, and him and his buddy cleaned up all their stuff, and they left and went out of there. I don't know where they went, but so it was just an interesting conversation. But I think the reality of it is you have to pay attention to when they say public school. And funding public schools, really, who's funding that? And what are they funding it for? Ought to be the question.
Todd, I want to be clear about one thing too. I think public education is a good thing. Okay, because there's going to be, I mean, there can be arguments made on either side. I'm willing to have those arguments. I'm not, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not against the concept of public education.
Me either.
I am against federalized education. Okay, federal control of it. I am absolutely against that, 100%. And I think there are better ways to do things. Whether that means going back to the past or whether it means a new model, as long as it's not centralized, as long as it's not dictated to us by our federal or national government, I'm open. Let's talk. Let's see what works. I'm all about success. We've got the money. We spent the money on it, so let's get some results.
Yes, exactly. The money's already out the door. So let's let our teachers teach. Let's put it back to a local level, to a state level, and hold the districts accountable for the amount of or the type of education they're turning out of those districts. Let's not manipulate and dictate the type of education that's coming out of those districts. Let's let the districts do what they were designed to do, and that's educate the kids in that district.
Yeah. Here's something else and this goes out on a limb because, we have a lot of friends that are school teachers and I love them and respect them.
I have a lot of great friends that are school teachers.
So, we got to come back and preface this by saying this does not apply to every teacher, okay? Because I don't want to
Right.
be misunderstood in what I'm saying here. But having said that, it's time we get back to holding teachers accountable. And, I'm held accountable at my job. If I don't perform, if I don't meet metrics, I'm docked, literally docked pay, and I can lose my job. Okay. Now, teachers' argument is, well, there's so many factors out of our control. We can't control parents. We can't control, you know what? Neither can I. I can't control outside factors either. And what I'm always told is in my particular profession, I won't go into the details, but I'm always told, look, those outside influences affect every one of your coworkers exactly the same. So, you're going to be measured against your coworkers. And if you got coworkers that are succeeding in your same environment and you're not, that's pretty obvious to us. Those are metrics. You need to be held to that standard. Why can't, what's wrong with that idea? At least that concept. What's wrong with accountability in all professions, especially if they're getting public money? Now,
Yeah.
ideally, I would say, look, let's set up criteria that makes being a teacher something that's well rewarded. Because I do think teachers have been underpaid for a long time. I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
that's
I
changed or
would agree.
not, but I think they should be overpaid, quite frankly. But I think they ought to be held accountable to a very high standard too. Pay them well, hold them to a high standard, right? I mean, that just seems to make sense for me. And you go along with getting the feds out of it, bringing it back to the local rule to where people have a really good idea of who really is a good teacher and who isn't. I think there's a path forward there, and I think we need to be exploring that. But I think the first step is getting rid of the Department of Education. I really do.
Well, when you look at what the Department of Education has done to this country, it has done way more damage to this country than it has done good. And that's pretty much uh, in my eyes, there's nobody going to convince me any different in that because I watched it play out. You know, my generation was probably we're the last generation to know life without cell phones, life without the internet, all that stuff. None, everybody past my age, which is the Gen Xers, nobody understands that. Nobody knows that. But
Mm-hmm.
I saw what life was like with good teachers. I saw what when we learned reading, writing, arithmetic, American history, American exceptionalism, writing papers on why communism was bad and why
Mm-hmm.
living in the United States was good and why we should be feel very lucky and fortunate to live in the United States. And you had to get a grade based on that paper. That stuff doesn't go on today anymore. And I don't know what
At least not as widespread as it should, right?
right. But I think if you ask around to, I would say by and large, I might be completely off my rocker, but I bet I would say probably 70% of the teachers would love to be able to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, American history, build into our kids, give them the tools that they need to succeed and not be held to the standards that the state and federal government puts on us for testing and having to do everything that they're required to do now because they have to teach to a test or teach to get a certain level on the test and stuff. And I've heard many teachers tell me that it really doesn't do anything for the kids. They're just doing it so that they can get money. They have to make a
Yeah.
certain thing
I,
to get money. So
I don't disagree with you. I do think there are nuances to it. I do think there are depths of the argument. And Todd, the truth is, I think a tremendous amount of it depends upon geography. Are we talking rural? Are we talking urban? What kind of settings? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things that go into that equation. But that's all the more reason why you can't have a centralized federal Department of Education dictating all of these things to everybody. That's why I think school control needs to be as local as possible to fit the needs of the local community and local demographics as much as possible. I think we should have high standards every place. And
yeah,
whether it's a state, I don't really have a problem with the states running the educational programs, but I think the administration of those, I mean, states are the great experiment, right? If one state can do it one way, another state can do it another way, you can figure out what works best. But I think, off the top of my head, state setting standards and local areas, local districts setting the methodology. And I mean, I don't have any problem with that. We'll figure it out, right? But the first step, let's get the federal government out of it because that's what's allowed the indoctrination. Do you think we would have woke culture all across the country if we didn't have a Department of Education? It
no,
just it wouldn't happen. It just would not happen. We're empowering our enemies. We're empowering the enemies of the United States of America. And we're saying, here's the key to our kids' minds.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. And we've got to take those keys away.
It does. Good conversation though. And I mean, kudos to you on your book. This is the book. I don't know if my camera's gonna allow me to see it, but well, it's not about donkeys and elephants branding the real enemy. And Bill wrote this in 2017, way ahead of its time. I would encourage you to get it. I think you can get it. You can get it on our website, can't you? Primary the
I
ruling
believe
class.
so. That's right.
Primary the ruling class.com. You can get yourself a copy. The other thing I would encourage you to do is get a copy and share it with your friends and neighbors. It'll be a light bulb moment for you for sure. And it's more of a light bulb moment today every time I get into this book. I mean, it's just crazy how spot on you were with this stuff. But I think sharing this podcast with your friends and neighbors and people that you know, and being willing to put it out there and be part of those big, bold ideas is what it's going to take for us to get our country back squared around here, because it is a total disaster right now.
I agree. I agree. And thank you for the kudos. But the truth is, it's stuff that, everyone's starting to realize and understand now. And I'm happy for that. I truly am. But now we need to take action, right? It's one thing to say, oh, okay, now I understand. It's another thing to take action. And that's where we're at. And that's what we need to do.
Right on. And remember, while you're taking that action and sharing stuff with your friends and neighbors, it's always a great day to be an American, and it's okay to believe that. And communism, it still sucks. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.